Hey guys, welcome back. Robocraft Early Access coverage. This is episode 53. I'm Igneous, and today we're finishing off this guy, and then we're going to take it into a couple matches, just like bing, bang, boom. We've got stuff to do. Now, I decided one of the things that I wanted to do was relocate the driver's seat. We kind of just threw it on the last episode because I wanted to test it out in the practice map. We didn't really show you that too much, but it was there. That's it. But it's sitting too high, and the difficulty with the driver's seat that sits too high is that it's difficult to kind of obscure it. It's ideal if you can... Any bot, you can look at it, you can get a pretty good idea where the driver's seat is, just because it has to be usually one of the larger segments of the bot, especially in a build like this. So we wanted to recess it into the chassis a little bit. Very, very easy to do with this particular setup. We just took out a couple of the prisms and we put the driver's seat on top of the ones that were underneath. Problem solved. It's a reinforced spine compared to our normal builds. It's twice as wide. We're going to go some builds in the future 2 or 3 times the normal width, just for that extra strength. And now we got to put this big deck into place. We got a big deck, man. Very, very simple, straightforward. Same as what we're doing in the last episode, using the white blocks as kind of a form around the outside edge. Makes it a lot easier to place prisms that would otherwise be kind of a pain. You can see here we had to set basically a temporary block to attach the prism to, remove the temporary block, and then put it in place the way that we wanted it to be facing. It's easy, and it's not a bad way to do it if you're doing like specific, very detailed builds one at a time. But when you're doing something like a big flat structure with this method, anything you can do to speed the process is a good idea. So that's basically what we're doing. We've got a row of white blocks along the top now. We can replace all the blocks we just put there because they were facing the wrong way. And all of a sudden it's filled in. And it looks fantastic as a flat thing that you wouldn't necessarily know at first glance that it was built entirely out of prisms. You'd think it was built out of blocks. We've got just enough height on this that it'll come right across the top of the spine without actually connecting to it anywhere that we don't want it to. Now, we do want it to connect in various different places. The more places that it connects, the overall stronger it will be. There's really no major advantage to doing a deck like this with prisms instead of cubes, because it's just, there's only so many different ways you can route the damage in a setup like this. This is basically the equivalent damage absorption capability of cubes without having to go and buy a couple hundred cubes that I didn't want to buy. That's basically it. Whatever we can do with cubes, we can do with prisms if you figure it out and just spend a little bit of time thinking about it. So that's what we've done. I just saved myself a few 100,000 RP, not having to worry about buying things that I would never use after this build. I wanted something flat because we don't do flat very often. Normally we just kind of let the shapes kind of emerge as we build. Whatever kind of ends up suiting the function of the build is the shape that we end up with, and occasionally we'll make some tweaks in the name of aesthetics, but never really kind of making this design decision, this is how we want to look. We're going to be changing that in the very near future, as I've hinted at or flat out announced. We're going to be focusing more on aesthetic builds that are functional, just to mix things up. We can only do so much with the basics, the fundamentals of, you know, the armor core application of the Triforce principles. Before it's kind of samey. It's been done so many times before, there's nothing new that we can pass along that makes it worthwhile to watch a 10 or 15 minute episode. But if we can make some builds that look fantastic and maybe throw in a couple of new tips every once in a while, then I think that's going to be kind of cool. So here we're basically carrying on, doing what we said we were going to do. It doesn't take too long. It's just, you know, methodical, takes a little bit of time, not really a lot of planning because we know exactly what we want to do, and once we've got it sorted, it's just a matter of repeating it as often as necessary to spread across the entire bot. Now, in terms of function, we'll talk about this because people are going to question it. People are going to be wondering how this fits in the grand scheme of things. It still remains extremely difficult to build a viable bot when you've got 2 guns on the bot that combined take up 500 CPU. Especially when you've only got 1258 CPU to work with. That kind of really shrinks everything down. Wheels are not super expensive in terms of CPU, but there's a cost. If we wanted to have electroplates, they tend to be fairly expensive. overall, it's basically, we're trying to build a bot that's large enough to contain the weapons. I would not normally build a bot this size and sacrifice the defensive capabilities of the bot if I didn't need it this size in order to get the guns to fit. Now, we can side mount some of the guns on a cruiser, but as I found out on one of the smaller designs, if the guns clip into the ground, they actually impair your ability to move. And if it clips into the ground in a bad spot, it can make it actually very, very difficult to free yourself, because as you're trying to reverse or move forward or whatever to get the gun out of the ground or tilt the gun up or whatever, the bot's movement is going to be restricted in certain directions. So it's just, I don't like the side mounts on cruisers for that specific reason. It's just a little bit too restrictive, and the potential for things to go wrong for something silly like a gun clipping into the ground, not worth the aggravation to me. It's not necessarily a bad system. It makes perfect sense. If you got a giant gun sitting on the side of your car and you dip it into the ground, it's going to be like pole vaulting. It's, there's nothing surprising about that. It's sort of like this, only it doesn't do the vaulting. It just does stops dead or won't allow you to turn on that side kind of thing. So this whole deck that we're doing now is just there to protect the spine. It's there to draw the eye away from the guns if we can. It's something larger than the guns, if you can imagine that. And that's it. It's so simple. It's because we don't have the CPU to do anything more involved than that. Even if we had, like I said, even if we had 1511 CPU, the current coded maximum for the game, it's iffy. It's iffy what you could manage to do building a tier 10 bot with megabot class weapons. So we're just about done. The deck is kind of taking shape. It's not taking a long time to get there. This whole build was just under an hour from start to finish, including a little bit of time in the practice map, kind of bombing around, making sure that there weren't any kind of crazy glitches with regards to, I don't know, length versus steering wheels versus whatever it could have been. And just like that, the whole enormous deck is done. I had visions in my mind of people trying to treat this like an aircraft carrier and landing their bots on the deck, and I thought that would be kind of funny until I end up being the bot that gets flung off into the distance, because the physics is just a little bit wonky that way. Realistically now, that it's basically done, and I'm kind of looking at what I can do to smooth things out a little bit. I realized also the wheels are sticking out, which is obviously we could see long before we got to this stage that the wheels were sticking out, but it's a question of how much CPU are we going to have left once the deck is in place to actually do anything about it. So once we get a little bit more frontal protection to reduce a little bit of the shots going directly from the front to the wheels, and also maybe soaking up a little bit of plasma splash before it gets to the wheels in frontal assaults, which is just, wait till you see. It's fantastic. We can throw in some blocks around the wheels now that aren't going to give it 100% protection, but they do stand to absorb some of the damage heading towards the wheels and give us a little bit of extra time before we start struggling with mobility, because some or all of our wheels have been lopped off. Pretty straightforward. We're going to do a little bit of extra coverage in the front for the weapon platforms, just again because it's more blocks that we can put in place that absorb a little bit of damage. And that's really all it's about with this whole method. We're not using a ton of electroplates. In this case, we're not using any. So we have to come up with other ways to manage the damage, which means potentially sacrificial blocks. Some might call it spaced armor or ablative armor, whatever they want to call it. It's the whole idea that you're going to take damage no matter what you do, and you got to choose whether you'd rather lose some blocks or whether you'd rather lose some components. With electroplates, it's a little bit different because they recharge, obviously, but at the same time, there are situations where even electroplates aren't really... they'll be knocked off almost immediately. So it's just a question of what kind of electroplates you're using, what tier they're from, and what kind of tier you're in. It's, for me, I get kind of occasionally looking at the shapes of the electroplates and forgetting that that's actually starting to get a little low tier. It's not going to really be all that helpful. So with any builds going forward, I like to kind of consider things in terms of like tier 8 and above electroplates, maybe tier 7. I like the tier 7 because they look kind of cool, but that's about as low as I let myself go. We're getting a little bit of refined detail now, and I'm kind of looking at this whole thing here with the trying to cover up the driver's seat because it's sticking out. There's only so much we can do to conceal with a bot that's kind of this. It's actually a very low-profile bot in the grand scheme of things. But we just want to make sure that we've got a little bit of protection for it. Not necessarily. I mean, someone looks at this, they're going to see that little knob sticking up out of the deck. It's pretty obvious what that is. But it doesn't draw your eye the same way a completely exposed driver's seat does. And also, again, gives us a few more blocks to absorb some damage. So here's the thing. We've got a little bit of extra protection on the wheels. We've got 2 guns. Great big giant flat deck. And now we get to see what this thing would perform like in the event upcoming to kill bots with TX1 SMGs. Now, I know before I get anywhere near an enemy that offensively we're at a disadvantage. I know that defensively we're at a disadvantage, primarily because, again, CPU taking up armor value is basically what it comes down to. And the guns themselves are very large, prominent, appealing targets that if you lose 2 guns, you're done. It's game over until you find a medic. All you're doing is maybe, if you're lucky, you're driving forward and finding the enemy's base and starting a cap. That's what happens if you lose 2 guns, is bad things. But we'll give it a shot. We know already, I mean, if you look at the distribution, the kinds of bots that we're seeing in matches, it's like 2/3 SMGs. A lot of the time, people are getting ready, people are building the SMG bots, people are playing SMG bots the way they always have with their tier 10 stuff, but then you stack them alongside the people doing tier TX1 stuff. A lot of SMGs. It's pretty crazy. But that understanding is kind of giving us a little bit of an idea we can apply to this situation. I just basically drove around a flank looking for somebody to shoot at and didn't find anyone, which is kind of a tragedy. And now I'm here capping. It's not really the best scenario to be in because it's a cruiser compared to the hovers that I'm used to. It's a slow vehicle. It could be slower, but it's still a slow vehicle. It's got range of an SMG, that's not a problem, but actually hitting things across the map is a little bit dicey because the fog. All you can really see is a nameplate, and then you're guessing how far below that nameplate you have to fire to potentially hit something that could be behind a rock, for all you know, because you can't see. So now I'm feeling like our team has kind of dropped the ball here. If you look at how many of their guys are still alive and how many of our guys are still alive, nobody is moving back to support the cap, and the cap at this point looks very much like our last chance to succeed in winning this match. Here comes the enemy hero. There he is, pushing his way through. There goes 1 gun. There goes 2 guns. That's game. That's a problem. It really is. Now, given how relatively flimsy our bot is, we did okay. We lived for a little while, not a lot. We were kind of tipped up and he was getting some shots underneath us, which obviously didn't help. But that's kind of, I saw that and I said, yeah, nobody is going to be surprised at that outcome with any kind of bot that's designed specifically to carry TX1s and only TX1s. Recently confirmed that you can have TX1s and SMGs on the same bot. The game will allow you to do that, but the last confirmed statement from the developers is that if you've got 2 different kinds of guns on your bot, if, say, for example, the T10 SMG is the gun that fired the kill shots, you don't get credit for the 100 kills. It has to be a shot from a TX1 SMG, regardless of what else you have on the bot. And so it makes sense that we practice a little bit to see what kind of nonsense we're going to be getting ourselves into with a bot like this. And again, you can see people making smaller bots that are, I've seen some hovers that have 4 TX1s on them, and they're so flimsy. It's one of those situations where you can't blame anyone for trying, because everyone is trying to make this thing work with the bot that they're happy with that's actually going to be able to contribute, knowing that there are going to be other bots in that match that are ideally suited to ruining them. It's just the way it is. Again, here we go off in the distance. I can barely see the silhouettes of the bots. The nice thing, at least about this, I got a thing with the cruiser. I don't have to worry about my bot rotating while I'm zoomed in, causing problems, making a mess. So it would be nice, you know, we could get a couple of hits on the enemy, kind of contribute something, unlike the last match where we contributed cap points. But the funny thing about contributing cap points is if you don't actually win by capping, it doesn't matter. It's just one of those things. It doesn't mean anything. So now all hell is breaking loose. The enemy has flanked us. They've gone all the way around, so we'll kind of spin around and see what we can do over here. We're closest to this side, and they're going to start capping if we don't do something. So, you know, it's six of one, half dozen of the other, which direction I go. But understanding my bot and understanding the limitations of my bot, I don't want to be pushing myself up to the front because I'm not suited to handling that kind of abuse. Nor necessarily anyone else on my team. Here comes an SMG, being a bit of a pest. So I'm kind of, there goes again, and you can see he's aiming specifically for my guns, and he's successful in it. There they go, just like that. Problem solved. It's a smart strategy. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing, but it's going to echo fairly regularly through the rest of this match. You can see the deck is holding up fairly well. It's not awesome. It's not super anything, but it's effective. It's just as effective as if it was made entirely out of cubes. We're missing some bits and pieces here and there, but overall, you know, it's a thing. I'm not really enthusiastic about this bot and this experience in building so many different kinds of bots, experimenting with different things, trying to make this whole thing work. And then observing the outcomes in the matches, I'm not at all enthusiastic about this event. In fact, now might be a good time to announce that we're not actually going to be participating in the event. Instead, we're going to be doing our best to hunt the hunters and focus on bringing bots to matches that are ideally suited to countering these TX1 bots, giving us the accuracy to target their weapons specifically and the offensive power to kill them before they can kill us, and the defense that you can only have from using a bot with not TX1s on it and use that extra CPU for defensive capability. And that's going to be the event for us. We're going to hunt the hunters. Probably going to need to build at least one more bot to do that, so if you want to be notified when I add those builds, some match footage, whatever, and the hunting once it begins, you can always subscribe to my channel. You can also be notified by following me on social media. Links for that are always in the information section below the video. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.